Fantastic. And for anybody who needs them, we do have the closed captions enabled. So please feel free to turn on your closed captions. They are down in the 3 dots that say more. If you are joining us on Loom watching the replay, there is a transcript on the right-hand side of this video, and you can use the transcript to navigate back and forth through the video to replay the golden and beautiful words of Stephen and Janine as many times as you like. Feel free also to chime in that chat box what your challenges are with newsletters. I already saw somebody who said, I quit running a newsletter because of MailChimp. And I got to tell you, I found MailChimp really, really hard as well. And we are going to dive all into that. Substack, MailChimp, Flowdesk, oh my. But social networks are in flux. Writers want more control over who sees their words and how often. And newsletters are on the rise. So do you need one? Which platform is the best fit? Should you monetize? And what the heck are you gonna write every time? So today, before we start, we wanted to let you know also that our sister program, the Express Lane, has officially folded. It turns out that 2 emails a week on Building Platform were a little too much for everybody, including us. If you are an Express Lane subscriber, you will still have free access to the archive for another 3 months while we figure out what's going to happen next. And if you recently unsubscribed, just email me and I'll put you back on the list to be able to access the archive, because we really want you to have that resource as you move forward here and as you build platform. Speaking of emails, today we're talking newsletters. Let us introduce our special guests. Sharla, who's our first guest?
Stephen Knežević is a freelance marketing and brand strategist, the former director of marketing at Creative Nonfiction, where he was my coworker for 6 years. He's a writer, artist, and email newsletter enthusiast, and I'll be sure to put his information in the chat box if you want to learn more about him later.
Fantastic. And Stephen was telling us before we started today that he's even thinking about putting together a little package of services for writers who just need to get started and need some hand-holding through that beginning process of starting a newsletter. Janine Willette's memoir about reclaiming her own humanity after childhood sexual abuse. It's called The Part That Burns, and it was a 2021 Kirkus Best 100 Indie Books finalist for the Next Generation Indie Book in Women's Literature. Her essays and fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Narrative, Master's Review, and more. She teaches writing at the University of Minnesota and also has her own program called Elephant Rock. Welcome, Stephen and Janine. We are so glad to have you here. So we're going to hear from both of you as we go, but Stephen, will you start us off? What exactly does a marketing and brand strategist do?
Thanks. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm excited to be here, and hello to everyone. That's a really good question. I know that I try to avoid words like that, marketing speak and stuff like that, as much as I can. But essentially, the easiest way to think of it is strategy is something that's going to get you from point A to point B, meaning it's where you are now to where you want to be. Strategy is kind of the connective tissue between those two things. Tweeting 3 times a day is not a strategy. That's a tactic. That's a tool you can employ. Even email, what we're talking about today, it's really a tool. It's not necessarily an overarching strategy. And so when I work with people, I try to take a holistic view into what they're doing, how they're doing it, their core values, their beliefs, what they're trying to accomplish, for whom, why, all those things, and we bake it into a strategy that gets them from where they are to where they want to be. That's probably the simplest way to kind of describe that. And I work with writers and artists and arts organizations. And as Charlotte mentioned, I was at Creative Nonfiction Foundation for 15 years. So in the nonprofit sector, and I work with small companies of one, basically, and stuff like that. So that's the easiest way to describe it, I think.
Awesome.
Janine, your newsletter, Writing in the Dark, was an instant Substack bestseller. How do you start the newsletter, and where did the readers come from?
Well, first of all, again, also, yeah, thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here. So I started my Substack about 4 months ago. I put out my first issue in November of 21. And I'm thinking about what you just said, Stephen, just because I feel like so much of my I don't know, so much of my so-called strategy has just been like doing the next thing, you know, that's in front of me. And the Substack was a lot like that. What happened is that about a year ago, I some friends helped me, kind of really coached me and encouraged me to start a Patreon, in part, you know, to support the new book and so forth. And so I did that. And part of that Patreon included a monthly newsletter, part of the, you know, the benefits that people get. There's just a tiny group there, like about 30 people who support me on Patreon. And so that part of that was a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, and weekly writing prompts. And I was doing those, that monthly newsletter over MailChimp, which I despised. Like, I cannot, like, I just, you know, and I was so glad, Allison, it's so hard. It's so counterintuitive. It's so anti-intuitive. And I would have to, like, you know, I had all this aversion. I'd have to like build myself up to it every month to go and like wrestle with MailChimp. And so meanwhile, I was watching what was happening over on Substack, as we all, you know, I'm sure have been. And I thought, that's got to be easier. It's, you know, it's just like, I just have to be able to do my newsletter on Substack. And so again, you know, I'm not very technical, so I got someone to help me kind of import my list. And because, Allison, you mentioned my program, Elephant Rock, I did have a mailing list of about 600 people who were made up of, in part, people who've taken classes from me in the past, and in part, just people who find my website and sign up for the newsletter. And so we did import that list to Substack as free subscribers. And yeah, and that's really all I thought it was doing, is like, you know, moving from a really bad tool to a better one. But then what happened was way, way beyond that. Like, people just really started responding very positively and quickly, which I wasn't prepared for or expecting that, but I leaned into it and, you know, started to just really pay attention to what was working and do more of it, and invest a lot more time on it than I was planning to, because it was being so well received.
I love that. That is absolutely fantastic. And we're going to ask you a little bit more about how you built it in just a second. Stephen, you mentioned that having a newsletter is not being on Twitter 3 times a day. We have a person in the chat, Jennifer, who said that she was turned off by MailChimp because they printed her home address and couldn't change it. I got to say, it is legal that you have to have an address there, but my address is, I can see grass from my window if I stretch, Dubai, UAE, and a random zip code, because they insist that I have a zip code. So, Stephen, what skills transfer over from social media to newsletters and vice versa?
Well, I mean, I think skills, that's a good question. I honestly think that I come from a place where, and this falls right in line with what Janine was saying, I believe that marketing should be creative, it should be fun, and it should feel like a natural extension of what you're already doing. If you're not enjoying it, you're doing it wrong, or you're using the wrong tool. It's not a good fit for you. And so even something as simple as moving from MailChimp to moving to Substack can really be freeing. And so as far as skills go, you know, you just kind of have to know yourself. What do you like to do? I know people who are like Twitter power users. They have their phone always attached, they're always engaging, and they're in there and they love it. Yeah, exactly. But really what happens is people feel obligated to use a specific tool because they hear everyone's on Twitter, everyone's on TikTok. I got to get on TikTok. What about Snapchat? Oh my gosh, now everyone's over here, and you're just chasing the crowd, and you're doing it out of some weird obligation, or you're believing some myth cooked up by Silicon Valley that this is the town square and everyone's here, and it's BS. It's not true. And if it's a place or a space or a tool you don't want to use, everyone that's in that space that's enjoying it will sense that on you. They can smell that stink from a mile away, that you're there out of some weird obligation, you're not having fun, and they're not really going to want to come play with you on there. So I think the real challenge is finding something that you like. It could be as simple as, I like just blogging on my website. That's all I want to do. I want to put my thoughts on a blog. Well, guess what? There is an email tool that will connect your website, your RSS feed from your blog, and will publish it as an email. These things exist. And so when you're thinking of tools and skills, you know, it's kind of like a know thyself. Like, what feels natural? What do you like? How much engagement do you want? How much do you want to let into your life? I mean, they call it, like, like the stream for a reason. It's always flowing, and it's a total mess. And also, you know, and again, I find email at a nicer pace. It's more controllable. It's an asset you own, which I think is incredibly important. The social media platforms, ask any emo band that built a following on MySpace in the early 2000s, it can be taken away from you in a second. What's happening at Twitter, what's happening at Meta, they're just eroding these platforms. They started with a promise of connection, right? Facebook, when it launched, come find everyone you knew from high school and elementary school. My wife found her best friend from preschool on Facebook in the early days. And then they kind of subverted it and perverted that. They got everyone on board, and now it's not a place to connect, it's a place to be distracted. They're filling it with ads. They're filling it with. Anyway, I'm on a tangent, and I apologize. I'm off.
No, track. It's very true, and I think that's one of the really valuable things about being on our own platform is we own our list.
Correct. Yes.
Janine, you said that you worked with the list that you kind of already had, and we had a question in the chat from Deborah. Do we start with an eensy-weensy list? Do you build the list first? What order should you be doing this stuff in?
Well, like I said, I did have a list. It was like a semi-active list, I would say. It wasn't like, you know, a defunct list, or, you know, I would get like usually a 25 or 30% open rate on MailChimp when I sent something out, which was very occasional. And then with, because what I was doing on Patreon was only for 30 people, but it was very thoughtful. Like like, you know, this was like me really trying to give people something valuable. Like, you're supporting my work and I want to really give something back to you. So it wasn't, you know, marketing per se, but, you know, I think I'm really resonating with what you're saying, Stephen. It's like, it really mattered to me. And in that way, it's like, you know, you're building loyal community. You're building like, you know, actual relationships of people who are really curious and supportive of what you're doing and want to actually hear from you, you know, so that felt really good. And when I moved that to Substack, you know, I just kept doing the same, but then as people started subscribing, like paying to subscribe, then I felt like, you know, there was this moment of like, well, these 30 people, like they really know me and trust me. So I can kind of like have my, you know, they're going to give me the benefit of the doubt. And then with Substack, as people who I didn't know started to, you know, file in and subscribe, I felt the stakes get higher. And, you know, so yeah, so like I said, I started putting a lot more time into it. But my feeling is that I'll just give people numbers just to quantify it, to make it, you know, more useful. So I did import 600 names to the Substack. But now 4 months later, I think the total subscribership is like 2,000, you know, 2,000 plus. So that's tripled in just 3 months. And I think that, and paid subscribers are like 300 paid subscribers. And so I think that, which started from like zero. And I think that what that tells me is that no matter the size of your list, I don't think that's what's as important as the, you know, this quality that Stephen's talking about. Like what I'm doing on Substack is like near and dear, you know, to me and to what I care about. And I'm really, I'm writing about the craft of writing, and I'm writing about it in a way that's really specific to my beliefs about the craft of writing. And in some ways I'm, you know, ignorant of sort of like the rules that are supposed to govern what we're supposed to do. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people have said, wow, this isn't like a newsletter. You know, what you're doing, oh, this isn't, you know, this is different from a newsletter. And it's not that I'm not aware of that. It's just that I'm doing it anyway, because like I said, initially I was just doing it for a handful of people anyway. And I was giving them what I had promised to give them. So I think that also underscores for me that so much of it, is about bringing to your, you know, so-called marketing, that sense of like what your passion is and leaning into it, even if sometimes it's a bit against the grain of conventional wisdom about what works. And, like, oh, you can only have, a newsletter entry should only be this long. Otherwise people don't have the attention span. But that's not what I'm finding, for example.
Yeah. Oh, can I jump on the back of that real quick? Because I really love a lot of things that Ginny just said. Number one, this approach of creating value for others. I think that's key in anything that you do. And when I talk to people who are weirded out by marketing or sales, I try to reframe it by saying it's not marketing, it's storytelling. You're really just telling a story for other people to enter. I signed up for Janine's email list when I was invited onto this panel with her, and she does an awesome job of it. Like, she shows who she is. She has a point of view. Her personal values are baked into it, and you can tell that she's actively trying to give more than she takes. And that's really the best approach. And as far as rules go, there are no rules other than you have to make good work. I mean, that's it. And I think we all know that part of it. That's sort of understood. But as far as the marketing or the story that you're telling or how you're adding value, as long as you're trying to honestly connect as opposed to steal attention and to give more than you take, you're better off for it. And your email newsletter can look at like anything. I used to sign up for one that was a 5,000 word email about dust. This guy was obsessed with dust, and he would send these intense, in-depth researched essays about dust. And they would show up randomly whenever they were done, like every 6 months, sometimes 2 weeks apart. I waited 3 years for another one. It was awesome. So it can be anything. Anyways.
So this is a question both for you, Stephen, and for Janine. We've like thrown around a bunch of words here like Substack and MailChimp, and what platform have each of you used, and what would you recommend for authors starting a newsletter, and maybe even adding to there why someone might want to start a newsletter? Like, what's the purpose of a newsletter ultimately?
Janine, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'll take that on. Obviously, I've kind of already revealed my bias. Substack, it's just so much easier to use. It's more beautiful. I think Substack for writers it was made for writers. So, the platform from, the technical aspects of it to the appearance of it to just, the context of it, the community of it. I'd recommend Substack if for anyone who hasn't already got a newsletter and wants to start one, or who isn't satisfied with their current platform.
Janine, do you, sorry, let me just interject here. Do you keep everything on Substack now, or is Patreon still integrated? And for those who haven't heard of Patreon, it is a way that people can regularly give you money for a wide variety of whatever you would like them to subscribe to. So how do you run it? Purely through Substack or also through Patreon?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't want to be like doubling up. So I don't put the weekly things, and the monthly newsletter on. If I put it on Patreon, it will send it out to those 30 people. Then they would be getting those things via Substack and Patreon. So I don't do that. And they know that. We had to go through like, I have a program manager. When I did this, I hired a former student of mine to work for 5 hours a week to help me do this. And that's just another, like, throwing it out there. Sometimes you have to just have help, like this, none of this is easy or like comes naturally to me. So, he helped me import everything. He helped me figure out like, okay, how are we going to do this so we're not doubling up on Patreon? And so we, let everybody know that now they were going to be the 30, patrons. Now you're on Substack and you're going to get these, benefits that way. And then for people who are like, Patreon has tiers where people can support you at a higher level. And so anything that's above and beyond the weekly writing prompts and the monthly newsletter, then that still goes out through Patreon because it's separate from the Substack. Does that answer your question, Allison?
Yes, it totally does. And I hope it answers the question of the person who messaged me with that question.
Okay.
Janine, can I ask you a super rude question while we're on Patreon and Substack, and you can tell me to F off if it's not a good question?
Okay.
What makes your newsletter worth paying for? Because I generally advise writers don't start with monetization because it is very hard to generate content that is actually worth paying for on a consistent, regular basis. Like usually it's like stock tips are the newsletters that people will pay money to subscribe to. how do you make it worth paying for? I mean, I've been on your newsletter. I know what I think, but what's your strategy on your end?
Okay. Okay. So first of all, yeah, no, I'm happy to try to answer that because like I said, I was surprised. Wait a minute, like people actually are paying to subscribe. The only reason I monetized my Substack right from the beginning is because, and this is why I keep emphasizing this point, I had 30 people on Patreon who were already paying me for that content. So I felt like, well, there was a pre-existing paywall. So I thought, okay, well, those things are behind this monthly newsletter, Writing in the Dark, and the weekly writing prompts. Those will be paywalled, but I will put out lots of good, valuable free content. And I just want to emphasize that too. And you had said in our email correspondence, Allison, that I have 2 newsletters, and it isn't really that there are 2, it's just that some things are behind the paywall and some things aren't. And what I knew just from years of experience in being a human is that you're always well served by giving as much away as you can for free. And I knew that going into Substack. So even though I kind of felt like I needed to have a paywall to honor those who were already paying for certain things, it just felt disrespectful to then suddenly make it all free, even though some people were already paying through Patreon. It was complicated. So what I did was just also make a commitment, like I'm going to, just really, make a point of sharing, the highest value stuff I can for free on Substack. And the benefit of doing that on Substack is that, if it's free, then a whole bunch of people can see it, and can choose to subscribe. Whereas if it's behind a paywall, then only those people who are paying for it can see it. So I wanted to let a lot of people know what I was doing in case they might be interested. And so that's what I have been doing. And then to answer your question about like what would make it valuable, what I've been trying to do, so I'm a writer and a teacher, and I've been teaching for about, this is crazy, but like 25 years. So I've been teaching for a really long time. And I think that the reason that people, from the feedback I'm getting, from the comments and the emails and the feedback I'm getting, which include things like, oh, I feel like I just took a class, or I feel like this is like an MFA, in writing, without having to do the MFA. And that's really what I've been trying to bring is like, I'm just going to generously, write in a way that is, I know my audience isn't everyone. I think my audience are people who are writers and who care about writing and who care about language and who care about what writing can do and who are interested in making their own writing as powerful as it can be, and who just believe that's a lifelong process, that it's not just for beginning writers, it's for all writers at every level. There's always, it's kind of magical and alchemical what we can do with the written word. And so I'm bringing like what I've found over the years can unlock that for people. And I'm making a bunch of it free. But then there are those things that are behind the paywall. And so people I just find are kind of following along, they're signing up. And then after a while, they're like, I think I am going to upgrade. I want to get all of it.
Just like getting somebody hooked on heroin, the first one's always free.
Yeah. I think if I can pile on to that, I think Jeannie's doing a couple of things really, really well. Number one, it is all about creating free ideas that spread and then having kind of an expensive expression of those ideas that people can come back and pay for. So the more you put out there for free, the more people are going to want to reciprocate on that end. I also think that it's important to note that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so from Janine's standpoint, like she's very personal in her emails and she puts a lot out there and she serves very much as a guide and a teacher, and there's a lot of value there, but also there's a lot of her in there. And I think that people get a sense of her and understand where she's coming from and what she believes. And it's a kind of a belief matching process. Marketing, I mentioned earlier, is really storytelling, but it's sort of about telling the right story to the right people in the right way. So the right story is like your story, where you're coming from, what you're trying to do, why you're doing it. to the right people, the people who need to hear those stories. And telling in the right way is really where that sort of magic of marketing happens. That's the story you kind of tell together. But that's like how you're offering, what you're offering, the price of it, how you're connecting and engaging, and all those things at work. So I think whether or not Jeannie's really aware of her strategy, like it's pretty much pitch perfect, and it's kind of what I try to help people create. Is that sort of sense of generosity and openness, and truly kind of connecting and adding value in a way that's personal and helpful. But
Barbara has a question about, what do you recommend for content of an author's newsletter? If it's all advertisements for authors' books, that's not too enticing, but neither is cute kitty pictures. So that can be too random. Can you, either one of you, discuss content?
yeah, sure. Again, it should be an extension of the work you're doing. I mean, if what you're doing is creating kitty cat memes, there's certainly a market for that, and there's people who would want to be on that email list. But nobody wants just to be sold to over and over and over again, unless what you're selling is truly something that can offer some sort of transformation for them or solve an actual problem for them. Showing up and saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. People are gonna be like, I can't, unless that book has some magic spell in it that's gonna solve my problems. I'm not necessarily gonna be interested. And even after a while, your message loses steam. So again, if you're a mystery writer, create a newsletter about your favorite mystery books or authors. Start sharing. I mean, there's a really wonderful book. It's super short and kind of basic and has drawings in it by this writer, Austin Kleon, who has a massive email list, but it's called Show Your Work. And it's just a really great primer on how to do that, how to share yourself through your work, like your best version of yourself, and kind of bring people along for the journey. That's really what you're offering people in your email, is like, I'm on this journey. If you want to come along, this is where I'm going. Come along with me. I'll take you there. We'll do it together. And so you want to think of it that way. Again, it's not selling. You're offering to solve a problem or create some sort of change in someone's life, or just to be there for them. Either of it's just connection. Just say, hey, you're not alone. I'm here too. I'm figuring it out. You can start an email about how you don't know anything about marketing. Join me. We'll figure it out together. So yeah. I don't know if that's an answer. But.
Janine, what do you choose for content? How do you make your content bringing people along on the journey?
Well, I like what Stephen just said. And I think that, we talked a little bit at the beginning about social media, and, I got onto Facebook back in 2008, right from the get-go. And kind of similarly to what I was saying about Substack, as quickly as Facebook unfolded and developed, I was, kind of like found that I was, I don't know if this is even a word people use anymore, but kind of like, live journaling or whatever, and engaging with people that way. And I think, really, in a very personal way, just kind of bringing people into process and bringing people into, and always kind of through this lens of writing and the writing life. So that has been always really satisfying for me. Like, I really believe in writing community, and just finding a way to, any way that kind of strengthens and builds that writing community. And so for my Substack, it really has been a natural extension of that. It's a little bit more formalized and a little bit more scheduled, but really talking about, the craft of writing, but through the lens of somebody, a very specific individual, that would be me, who's trying to do it. And so it does include process stuff. It includes challenges, like I'm working on a novel right now, and, and it's really hard. And so I'll break down different, problems or challenges that I'm overcoming in the novel. Sometimes I share creative work to change it up, just to keep it eclectic. but yeah, but I think the main thing is, I do think about my email box, and I have like something like, it is just obscene, like 70,000 emails or something. And so when I'm putting together something that's going to go land in people's email boxes, like I really do want it to feel like some small gift, like,
Yeah.
and if it has some mention, somewhere of a class that I'm, this is always at the bottom, maybe there's an upcoming class or there's something, then that's the de-emphasized part, I just want it to be like, here's a gift, and then maybe there's some things you want to know about that are going on.
I love that. Andromeda Romano-Lax is with us today. She is a novelist, and we've had a number of questions in the chat about, well, what should a fiction writer include? Andromeda, you're teaming up with another writer to do a newsletter, that is specifically focused on fiction, and you're soliciting guest authors as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Andromeda? I know you're there, Andromeda. You unmuted yourself a minute ago. Are you gone? Maybe you're gone. Okay. Charla, you take it.
Okay, let me see.
Can I say one thing on top of, I'd like to just continue to piggyback onto everything Janine says, because she's saying it so well, and it's super spot on, but I love the idea of a small gift. And another quote I came across a long time ago, there's an individual, they were doing emails for, I forget, BuzzFeed, but they got hired by the New Yorker to run the New Yorker's newsletter. His name's Dan Oshinsky or something. He started this thing called Inbox Collective. But at the time he was hired by the New Yorker, they interviewed him, and he made mention, and this always stuck with me, that how he always thought of the email inbox as a living room. And if you think of your own living room, it's a very personal space, and you don't invite everyone into it. Twitter could be, quote unquote, the town square, and that's where all the barroom fights happen and all the, everything happens in the town square. But in your living room, it's a very personal space, and you're only really going to invite in there a select few. So if you want to make the cut, if what you're sending out there, if you want to be invited into people's personal spaces, again, you have to present it as a small gift. It can't be about you. It should be a reflection of you and what you're doing, but it's really for them. I think that the most powerful word in advertising and marketing is you. You frame everything for the other. It's never really about you. Even the book you're struggling with or writing about, yes, you're writing it for you, but when it's done, it's for them. It's for somebody else. Like, here, I made this for you. And that's really the best approach with anything. Even if you're writing a tweet or an email or a book, it's like, here, I made this for you. It's a small gift.
I love that. Andromeda, we have finally got you. Will you chime in and tell us what is it that you are doing with a newsletter, and how are you including other authors in it in case anybody here wants to pitch you? You are again having a microphone fail. Oh, life is full of sadness. That's okay, Andromeda. We'll talk about it another time. Janine, you looked like you wanted to jump in.
I was going to jump in, on what Stephen was saying, which is just like a quirky anecdote, a specific thing, which is that, I'm on Twitter. I'm not very good at Twitter, but when my book came out a couple of years ago, I thought, okay, I have to learn Twitter. So like, I am there, but I'm way too sincere for Twitter. Like, you have to be kind of funny, and Twitter has a certain like aesthetic, right? And it's not my set point. So, but at Substack, I can like do the thing that I'm actually really good at, which is making people cry. And so recently, Samantha Page Rosen did a write-up of Substack newsletters for Electric Lit and included my newsletter. And it made my day when she said that, even in newsletter form, she'll break your heart. And I was like, oh my God, you get it, but I share that just by way of saying that, fiction or nonfiction or whatever it is that you're doing, like, I think that we all have a sense of what it is that makes us who we are, and what is sort of like our one superpower. And you can lean into that, and maybe that's what you bring to the living room. I mean, not everyone, is proud to have that be that they make people cry, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephen, what mistakes do you see people make when they start a mailing list? What are the missteps that we take? And could you also talk, if we're in a platform we don't like, how do we move that list to a platform that we do like?
Sure. I mean, speaking of platforms, I've used most all of them. And they really are hyper specific for very specific purposes. There is a tool out there for everyone. Substack is great right out of the box. It's not very complicated. I found it a little constrictive from a design standpoint, but I also have a background in design and visual art. And so I'm very much like aesthetics are important to me, and there weren't enough fonts or something in Substack. So it wasn't for me, but it's really great and easy to use. If you're moving your list, it should be fairly easy depending on what platform you're using. If you Google platform name, export list, instructions will show up. You just export your list and then you move it over. It should be fairly easy. That's the great thing about email versus social media. If you want to leave Facebook, you're not taking any of those people with you. You don't have the necessary their permission or their contacts, which leads into the biggest mistake I see is not getting permission for emailing people. Just because you have someone's email does not give you permission to actually email them. The reason your address is in the footer and it needs to be in the footer of emails is because of anti-spam laws being what they are. They're very strict, especially in Europe. And I think, I don't know how many people get convicted of spam, but if you're convicted, it's $11,000 per email. If you are a convicted spammer, it could be very expensive. And so email is the original permission-based marketing tool. Permission meaning people need to expressly say, I want to hear from you in email form. Again, it's their living room. You can't just show up. That's breaking and entering.
Stephen, splitting hairs here for a
Sure.
second. Abby asks, if you got their email from a form on your website that maybe it was a giveaway or a freebie or something, but you said there's going to be a future newsletter, is that a legit opt-in?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and there is a gray area. If you sell products, and even if you don't explicitly have a checkbox that says sign me up, you can technically add people. If they buy something from you, that's an implied permission. But it's always better to get explicit permission. And in fact, to do like a double opt-in. You actually want it to be, you want a few layers of getting on your email list because it cuts down on bloat on your email. I know Janine mentioned open rates earlier. Those metrics they're important, but they're also not very important. The way technology changes, I'm not going to get into it, but open rates are now all inflated anyway because of Apple. But that aside, yeah, I mean, like, so there's an implied, but you're usually paying for the Substack. I think doesn't matter how big your list is, but some platforms you pay for how many emails you have. So if you have people on there that aren't opening or engaging in your emails, you're paying for them for nothing. And so, you want to have a clean email list. And so you add a few layers of making sure they actually really, really want to be on it. And then also you set up a welcome email, lets them know they're on it. All these things, like there's a real process to it. And it's hard to get people on an email list versus getting them to follow you on social media. But so that's the biggest mistake, is just like, I have all these emails, I'm going to throw them on an email list and I'm going to email all my friends. They might love you, but they might not love you showing up in their email. And so you can do like a one-time, like, hey, I'm starting a thing. If you want to join me, please sign up here. That's totally allowable. And within range, like you give them a one-time shot, you make an announcement, you email them all once, all that stuff.
I actually put at the top of my email rather than the bottom. I mean, there's an unsubscribe in the footer, but I also put at the top, receiving this email in horror, unsubscribe or manage preferences.
Yeah.
Charlotte, you got a question?
Yeah. Someone wanted to know, okay, so you're going to start with, you're going to do this venture, you're going to make a newsletter. How do you start? Do you post it? Do you email everyone, say, hey, I'm starting it? You want to opt in? Do you put it on Twitter? How would you suggest people spread the news?
Probably all those things. I mean, if you're already on Twitter and you have some people following, yeah, you want to mention it. Don't bury the lead. If you got something going on and you want people to join, invite them. That's another mistake I see people make, especially when it comes to actually asking people to do something like buy my book. It's usually kind of a soft ask, or people are afraid to ask. Really, email is an action-oriented activity. Like, think about it. When you're doing email, you're taking an action on it. You're even if it's deleting it or unsubscribing, there's always some action involved with emails. So you want your emails to have some action, even if it is like, hey, let me know what you think of this email. That's a great opportunity to connect with people on your list and learn about what they want and how they, etc. But yeah, so yeah, just ask. And again, like, you can send an email and once ask them to sign up.
Janine, you have a particular way that you're attracting new readers right now, and you actually have a special offer for us here on the Writer's Bridge. What is your offer that you are hoping is going to attract more subscribers to your marvelous list?
It's an experiment. We haven't done it before, but again, my student who I hired to help me had the idea that we'd give you a discount. So it's a 25% off of an annual subscription with a special link for the Writer's Bridge. Yeah, just to say thanks for coming and for your interest in what I'm up to. And, you know, and I'll say, like, it's weird, Stephen, like, you know, you're right. And I think writers in particular, I don't know, like, we're creatives and we just want to make the work and have it just find its way magically to the right people. But somebody on Twitter recently posted about self-promotion, and it was really, I really resonated with it. They were talking about, like, in a way, it's kind of like, you know, if we just sit quietly and just think that people are going to find us, you know, that's almost more, I can't remember the words she used for it, but just that people think, oh, you know, I'll come across like X way or something if I self-promote, but in a way, it's more humble to say, I know that I have to actually help people find out about what I'm doing. I know that I actually have to do the legwork to get the word out. And I think when we're doing it, yeah, in a way that is not spamming and that is adding value, like, it's okay to do that, right? And to let people know what you're doing. And yeah, I post about when I put up a new issue of the Substack, I put it on my social media. But I don't just do it like a link. I actually talk about what I'm doing there, you know, so it's kind of like the same strategy as how I'm writing on the newsletter, is that I'm talking to the people on my social media who follow me there to, you know, as friends and colleagues, to say, this is what I'm working on, this is what's working, this is what's not working. So that, and I think that's something too that I've been doing all along, but that I also learned from watching people on Patreon and watching, you know, what they're identifying as valuable is for people to, you know, kind of like open the curtain, you know, it's like that curtain that, you know, the wizard is behind the curtain, and just to open that all the way up and say, no, actually, I'm just this, you know, bumbling human being who's figuring it out as I go also, like everyone else. And so if that's valuable, here's a peek into that.
I love that. And I want to mention, because somebody said back at the very beginning of this episode, they were worried because every time they send out an email, some people unsubscribe. And it is just as important to chase away the people who are not your people as it is to attract the people who are your people. And it's a good sign if some people are unsubscribing, because it means your content is focused. It means it's appealing to a specific audience. The other thing is, many times people unsubscribe because they're just freaking sick of email, and they just go through on a mad binge and go unsub, unsub, unsub. I don't check my unsubscribes except like once in a blue moon, because I just don't want to heap that like painfulness on myself. Stephen?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Unsubscribes are a blessing. You want to shun the non-believers is kind of how I think of it, right? Like, again, I'm going on this journey. Do you want to come along? Some people hop on, they go, yeah, this isn't really where I want to go. And they'll hop off, and you go, great, no problem. You can't take it personally. You do want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of spam flags, though. That's not a great place to be. You might have one or two because people will forget they signed up, and that's okay. But if you have a lot of people flagging your emails as spam, that's a troubling metric. So you do want to look at that. But yeah, I mean, as far as metrics go, I think, I mean, engagement isn't really about how many people open or how many people click, but I think a good test is if you email your list tomorrow and ask them a question, how many people respond? When I worked at Crave Nonfiction, every year we had an email list of 40,000 people. And once a year, I would make a point to say, hey, let us know what you want from us. Email me directly. I will respond to you personally. It took me like 2 months to respond to everyone that emailed us. But it was really enlightening and really a powerful thing. And so that's an even better test. Like, just ask them a question, engage with them. It's email. It can be 2 ways. It does not have to only be 1 way.
I love that. So I'm going to dive in because we always do a little tiny bit of author networking before the end here. Remember, please, you do not have to go into a breakout room. It is never as weird as you think it's going to be. If you do go to a breakout room, introduce yourself and trade newsletter information. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? We will be back in 5 minutes with a quick lightning round of as many questions from the chat as we can get to. Plus, each of us is going to offer one specific thing that you can do today to make your newsletter experience a wonderful one. Let's take 5 minutes in breakout rooms. Remember, you do not have to join. That is all good. And this is where I scroll through and try to make sure that nobody's left alone. Awesome. Everybody has at least one buddy. Okay. Scrolly, scrolly, scrolly. If you are still in this room, feel free to hang out and ask us a question if you have one. We would love to hear it.
I don't have a question. I just didn't have a good connection with the person was muted and whatever. So here I am.
That's okay. Hey, Stephanie, what was your question? Because you asked a really kind of neat question in the chat and it scrolled by so fast I missed it.
Oh, so is there any concern about once you have a bunch of paid subscribers, all of a sudden feeling like you don't have enough content to continue on, and then these people are expecting you to do content every week or however often is that's my concern, because I'm thinking about doing a newsletter for chronically ill people. And being chronically ill, I'm a little concerned about long-term being able to sustain it.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think one of the interesting things about that is, well, one of the key things that I hear a lot from a lot of people is, oh, you've got to be regular. You've got to share it on a really regular basis. And I've found that I have a sales email that I do as regularly as I possibly can, but I do a personal email about 4 times a year when I actually feel like it. So I think it's worth it to allow yourself the grace to be like, okay, maybe I'll be regular and maybe I won't. And I think the key thing is, when I am not regular, I open the email with something like, hey, remember, you subscribe to me and you don't hear from me very often, just so that people aren't like, where the hell is this email coming from? Does that
I meant if people are paying for the content.
In that case, you got to be regular.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you're being consistent, make it something you feel like you can do, like once a month or once, as long as you're consistent with it, that's all that people are really expecting.
Okay. Thanks.
We have a question. Victoria.
Can I just say hi? I just want to say to Stephanie, I love your new glasses. I haven't seen those, and I really like them.
They are new, yes.
Yeah, they're very nice and quite flattering and all that. They're really, really nice. I have a question about, just because Substack is something I'm thinking for a long time of doing, and I don't know what's wrong with me. Why I can't seem to move forward with the idea of a newsletter. And it's something in me, it's something about me and my personality. But does Substack charge, like, if you just want to start with your little group? Like, I was thinking, I have emails from my blog, and I have a school library lady blog, that's about books, and I want to talk about books in the Substack. if I move some of those people over, like, would I be able to do that free just to see how it goes? Or
Substack is free to get started with. You don't have to
Start.
pay anything until you
Okay.
start charging people.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you. 'Cause
Alex,
that might
what's
be a
your
place for me to
question?
start, like a little baby place to start, like small steps.
Hey, okay, Lora Hein.
Hey, glad
How
you're
are
here.
you? Okay, so I have a question. What is the difference between Flowdesk and Substack? Are they different or are they virtually the same thing?
They are very different. I use Flowdesk. I subscribe to a lot of people who use Substack. I find Flowdesk to be fun and easy to use, and it's really good for emails that are partially personal and partially salesy because it does design really pretty. Yeah, Karen points out, and Karen's a VA, by the way, if anybody has any VA questions for Karen at some point in the chat. But Flowdesk was the first program I used where I'm like, oh, good. I get to make my newsletter today instead of, oh, crap, it's been 6 weeks. I really need to send a newsletter. Substack, however, has open source stuff where people who are not subscribed to you can come view it and check it out. Whereas Flowdesk is purely a mailing list. It only goes to their email. So
Yeah,
that's the difference.
You can discover other newsletters on Substack, which is nice. I like that the option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really sort of set up specifically for newsletters, where Flowdesk is sort of for emailing, regardless of what you're emailing. Like you could do flow charts or whatever that is, quiz funnels type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Flowdesk has also introduced a new thing where if you're trying to sell something like a digital course or a workshop or whatever, they have very easy templates for web pages that are hosted through Flowdesk. And so you can basically set up, here is the sales funnel I would like to have. And it's really easy. I really like it. The other difference is Substack will be free right from the very beginning. Flowdesk, you will pay right from the very beginning. And it's a reasonable price. Like you can get 50% off for your first year. I'll put that link.
I signed up I signed up when you and Ashley had mentioned it. Like, I don't even know how long ago that was.
So
I'm
you're
like
paying
$19
$19 a month.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about Flowdesk is it's a set fee. They don't bill it based on how many people you have. MailChimp gets substantially more expensive. Yeah.
But does Substack charge per email?
Substack doesn't charge until you start charging other people.
It looks like we have a question from Jeff.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, what's your question?
Oh, you're on mute, Jeff. Yeah,
Jeff is typing. Jeff is having a microphone fail. But I'm glad you made it, Jeff. Says we can't access chat history due to admin settings. Oh, that's really weird. Well, Casey and anybody who's having trouble accessing the chat history, I will download the chat. And what I'd like you to do, we're going to take a quick lightning round in a moment, but please feel free to go ahead and put your newsletter information in the chat, and I will make the chat available after the Writer's Bridge. And we are going to dive into a really, really quick lightning round as soon as we're all back. Hey, Daniella, will you give us one more question as people come back from breakout rooms?
Yeah, I guess this is more like just tying together what everyone is talking about. So what people are saying here works really well on TikTok too, which is just our lives as writers is so interesting. So whatever you're writing about, you can just jump on TikTok. You can make a video about it, tie it back to how it works for other people that aren't you, and then have a pinned post about your book. I've built 20,000 followers in 4 weeks and got my book back up into the top on Amazon regularly.
That is amazing. That is absolutely
and I've had 6,000 people see the post of my book. I go viral on other things completely that have nothing to do with my book, but it'll drive it back to that. So all these suggestions everyone has been talking about with writing, you can do that on video too.
Love that. That is fantastic. And Daniella, we will be in your inbox at some point so that we can do something about TikTok, because I know a lot of us are like, hey, I would love to be on the TikTok. I hear it's where all the cool kids are nowadays, but I am old and terrified and you kids get off my lawn. Don't make me be on TikTok. So we are going to do
it's my new passion, and it took me like a year to figure it out, and then yeah, it's good.
Awesome. We will be providing the chat to everybody, and we encourage you to go ahead and drop your newsletter link in the chat. We will be sharing that with everyone. We are going to do a super quick lightning round. Charla, I'm going to pick a question and you're going to pick a question, and then we're going to get our top tips. Janine, if you have published your work on Substack, is it publishable anywhere else? Can you republish it? Do you still own it, or have you lost those valuable first North American rights?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's going out to subscribers. It's not public, it's not paid. The paywalled stuff is not accessible publicly. So, but I don't put new creative work on Substack, only previously published creative work. So, but I am, with regard to the craft stuff, I am considering a craft book, but I'm just assuming that, we make up those kinds of books out of lots of different things that we've written before. So I'm thinking it would be okay, but that's probably a question for somebody who knows more about rights than I do.
Charla, over to you.
Karen says, I have a WordPress blog. Is it best to go with MailChimp or MailPoet was suggested for WordPress because it integrates better tech support? What kind of tech support do you think you need?
I mean, that's a pretty specific technical question. I mean, it's hard to know without looking at the backside of the site. I've run a WordPress site that was plugged directly into MailChimp. MailChimp has a great plugin as well. I'm not familiar with the plugin that you're talking about, but there's also, if you're doing a blog to email thing through WordPress and that's what you want to do, there's also a thing called FeedBlitz, which is a direct RSS to email thing.
What's an RSS? I don't even know.
An RSS is something that Google tried to kill many years ago. Rest in peace, the Google Reader. But it's in the early days of Web 1.0, when personal blogs were all the rage, blogs actually pull something called an RSS. And you used to be you can still put them in feeders, but you can subscribe to blogs. It's a subscription thing. It's open source. It's really wonderful thing that blogs used to include. They don't always anymore.
And it let you deliver many blogs to your inbox. It was basically like having a big magazine subscription. Yeah. We are in our last 3 minutes. And one of the things we do at Writers Bridge is we always end on time. Stephen and Janine, you are welcome to bail out as soon as you're done, or you can stick around. Charla and I will stick around for a few minutes in case anybody else has questions. But let's take our top tips. What can somebody do today to move into their positive, happy newsletter experience? Stephen?
Marketing is theft. I mean, basically find an email or emails that you love from people who you respect and really enjoy hearing from, and then reverse engineer it. Figure out what they're doing, how they're doing it, maybe even what platform they're using to do it with, and then replicate it and put your personal fingerprints all over it. It's like, that's the best way to do it. Marketing is purely theft. That's the best way to do it.
Love it. Janine, what is your top tip for us to move bravely and beautifully into newsletters?
I guess I would just say that, all of the technical parts can be overwhelming, and all of those decisions can be overwhelming. So maybe just sit down and write something that you would actually really love to receive, in your inbox. Just focus on that part of it. That's the part you can control. And then worry about the rest, how to actually move it forward later. But just, take an hour and sit down and write something that you'd love to receive.
I love that. Charla, what's your top tip for today? And what's the next webinar coming up in the Craft Talk series?
So it figures that Stephen's and mine was the same because I've learned a lot working with Stephen. But I was going to say, follow newsletters of writers and editors and publishers that you admire, that are where you would like to be someday. See if there's elements that they include that you find rewarding, insightful, fun, and then share widely with your friends and network. Not only will you build, that generosity may open up doors for you and people appreciate you sharing their newsletters, but at the same time, it might help you hone what makes it worthwhile and resourceful and even fun. And It's also part of literary citizenship being generous, which is dovetails into what Jane Freeman's going to be talking about on Craft Talks tomorrow. So forgive me as I plug this really quickly, but she's going to explain ways you can organically and instinctually market your work by building goodwill in the literary world. So very similar to what we're talking about today. If you haven't signed up and you are interested, I'll go ahead and plug that into the chat box, but it's really simple. It's www.craft-talks.com. And that will be at 2 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and registration closes at 1 p.m. So
fantastic. I want to steal something what Maura said in the chat, which is don't wait for it to be perfect. The very best part for me of blogging, and thanks to Dinty, I have blogged for Brevity for going on 10 years now. I blog, I newsletter, and I do extensive Instagram captions. And one of the best parts of all is writing on a regular basis in a low stakes environment where it doesn't have to be my very best work every single time. And that's going to bring you to your writing, and that's going to give you more to be able to give to your readers who need your words. Happy writing, everybody. Please unmute yourselves for a joyful goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Stephen.
Loved it.
Tuesday.
Feel free to stick
everybody.
around for a minute if you have a couple more questions.
Nice to see you all.
Next month, we will again be on the last Tuesday of the month. We will be having an agent and publisher panel. What are they looking for?
Wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. Great to have you. Dinty, thanks for dropping by. It was so cool to have you.
Hi, Dinty.
I did.
Yeah. Hi, Dinty.
It was nice to be here.
Nice to have you.
Fascinating. Great guests, great conversation. I learned a lot.
I'm glad to hear that. Dinty, what made you start the Brevity blog?
Oh, that was so many years ago. I think my mule was sick, and I don't know. That's really a good question. I do have an answer, which is perhaps inspired by what I heard today, which is that I could tell there was a hunger out there that people who were specifically in creative nonfiction or essay writing, where brevity is focused, that people had a lot of questions and a lot of things they want to talk about, and not everybody can afford to go to a college class to do it. So sort of a place where people could communicate all their concerns, and it's grown way beyond what I ever imagined.
I love that, and I'm so glad that I get to be part of it. TJ, you have a question. I'm guessing it might be for Janine or for Stephen, although I think we may have lost Stephen.
Oh, that's okay. I just wondered if anybody knows, I didn't quite catch, what is the intersection between Flowdesk and Substack? Like, do we need them both? Like,
no, they are two separate platforms that work in two separate ways. Flowdesk is an email platform like MailChimp, like MailerLite,
yes,
like
I have
Constant
it.
Contact. Yep. And Substack is where you get it delivered as a newsletter, but it is also a blog that people can look at it online, and you are discoverable. They don't have to sign up before they can read your work.
Right. But I guess I was wondering, because if Flowdesk is managing all your email addresses, like, then do you just transport all those email addresses into Substack if you're going to start one, and then you'd have no more need for it because we're paying monthly? But the thing with Flowdesk is you don't have to pay per subscriber, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of trying to understand if there's a strategy there, or like before I delete something and get rid of it and then wish I hadn't,
Well, it's very easy to export all your subscribers into a CSV, and then it's like a fancy spreadsheet, and then you import them into whatever else you want to import them to. I would say, why don't you overlap, post the same content on both for 3 months, and figure out what you enjoy doing, and keep the one that makes you go, man, I can't wait to write. Janine, blog, email, newsletter, what would you recommend?
I think, I think it just depends on where you're at and how much of a commitment you want to make to it. I think that, I guess my one thing would be that I'm glad that I waited to import everything to Substack, and especially because I did monetize it from the start, that I'm glad that I did that when I had the time and capacity to invest in the content, so that I didn't, I would just say that, as much as we said a minute ago, just like, what is the one thing you can do to just start, that if you're going to do a newsletter, and especially if you're going to monetize it, but even if you're not, that if it's about audience building, before you kind of like go prime time, have things set up so that you can meet the expectations that you've set with it, so that people feel like they're receiving what they signed on to receive. And otherwise, there's other ways to interact with your community leading up to that.
Love it.
Thank you, guys.
Louise, you very lovelily sent in an email message, and my brain has been like in and out post-concussion. Will you ask your lovely question?
Okay, well, and it was kind of long. I'll try and, but it was precise. So I've had a Substack newsletter for 2 years. I write about it. I've put 22 issues, so approximately once a month, not exactly. I've got just over 200 subscribers. I've got a 61% average open rate. And I don't know if that's good or not. Like, starting from absolute zero scratch, like, I kind of feel like, hey, over 200 people, 60% of over 200 people are at least opening. I don't know if they're reading the whole thing, but they're opening this essay that I lovingly craft, that's sort of about me. And I don't know if that's good or not. Is that good? Well, it's not just about me, but it's more like personal essays. I'm not writing an advice or craft, or it's not a writing focused newsletter. It's out of my brain. And so, and for
60%
like,
open rate is great. 60% open rate is really good.
Okay.
Janine,
what should I be expecting? And
Janine,
how?
All right, quiet.
Go ahead.
like for folks that are in my bailiwick that don't have a book, like, how do you get more people to find you? The Substack area seems like it's getting crowded. That's the other thing. Again, that's the gist of my question, I guess.
Janine, you're the expert on this one.
I'll take a crack at it. Well, first of all, Substack says, 60% open rate is great. So I know Stephen said that, that's not the most important metric, but, we have our various metrics that we look at. It means people who you're sending it to are opening it. And I think that there isn't like one kind of rubric we can use for like what is good, or how many is a lot, or how many is a little, or whatever. Because as you said, it's so dependent on where you are in your kind of writing journey and trajectory and development, and what kind of audience you have access to build that newsletter. And the one thing I would just say is, I think Substack, it is really crowded. And when Musk bought Twitter, and then everyone was leaving Twitter, and Substack did a major promotion to get people to come over and own their content, as Allison was saying. So I just keep coming back to the one thing, and in the breakout rooms, I got put in a breakout room and was chatting with somebody lovely, but I write about writing, and I write for writers, and that wasn't so much a conscious decision. It's just like, that's what I have to say. And I know that that's where I have something valuable to add to the conversation. And I think that honestly, it might be frustrating or sound, I don't know, too theoretical, but I think that ultimately is the most important thing, is that what you're putting out there is adding value, like that it is something that everybody in here in this Writer's Bridge gathering has something that you can do. It's like Daniella was bringing her thing to TikTok. Like, everybody has something that they can bring in a certain way that only you can bring it, and really lean into that. Lean into the thing, that is, like, there's nothing new under the sun. There just isn't. So it's got to be the thing that you can bring in a certain way that only you bring it, and, be like ruthlessly unafraid of that. So I'll stop.
Awesome. Louise, did that answer your question?
It did. I think every situation is different. Every newsletter is going to be different. And I feel good about writing this one. And so I'm just going to keep doing it.
I would say that's what matters most.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
love that. We're going to take Juliana's question. If you have just joined, you have had a time zone issue, and we are actually at the very end. We are in the after party of the episode, but the replay will go up today or tomorrow. And if you're on our list, you will get the replay link. Juliana, give us a beautiful question to take us out.
Well, I don't know about beautiful. It's more like trying to put together the pieces that have been mentioned, and I think it was most prompted by something that Stephen said, and I think he may not be here anymore, but it has to do with I do have a Substack, although and I'm planning to restart it. I wrote it for 3 months last year, and I really like it. I think you can do a lot, and it does have that beauty that Janine was talking about. However, it does have much less like ability to do stuff, that you can do on a website. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to relate a blog. I mean, it doesn't, for me, translate directly. I write about activism, but I use a lot of graphics and characters and things like that. Translate to putting on the website the same thing that I put on the newsletter. And also there's another piece that has to do in something like MailChimp or MailerLite, which I have. You can do it. It has more about you're saying things to people directly. This is an update about my work, or this is a bunch of things. There's another sort of a flavor to a newsletter that I don't quite see in the Substack newsletters that I get, which are more.
Juliana, that is a great question. So, Janine, will you answer that for us? What's the feeling? What's the mood?
Well, I haven't mentioned this yet, but the writer who I first followed on Substack was Heather Cox Richardson, who writes Letters from an American. And it's, I think, still the most successful Substack in history. She's a professor of history at, I think, Boston University, and she writes about political events in the context of history. So she writes about like what's happening right now, but contextualizes it. She was just doing it on Facebook. I think originally she was just writing she started with the election of Trump, and she would just be like, here's what's going on today, and here's how this relates to the history of this country. And then I don't know how she ended up on Substack, who kind of steered her over there. But just like, I think she has hundreds of thousands of paid subscribers and is earning millions of dollars with her newsletter on Substack, which she began doing solely because of her passion for what was happening in the United States of America under the election of Trump, and that she had something to say about it. And so, and she's doing it like with no tech savvy, with no, any thing to like support this kind of success other than her knowledge and her passion for what she's talking about. So again, back to, your specific question, Juliana, like, I think, what you have to say is ultimately always going to be the most important thing. And then how you say it, or, the tools that support it and how it looks is going to be secondary. You can use Substack to get the message out and drive people to your website if that's what makes sense for you, with the intricacy of the graphics and things that you're needing to present for the type of thing you're writing about. But whatever it is, like, it always points back to like, what is it that you're out there, bringing and doing and saying, and then, just finding the tool that works best for you to do it.
I love that. I really love that. So go where your heart is pulling you and share your heart with your readers. Janine, thank you so much for being here today. And everybody will get the link to sign up for Janine's newsletter with the special bonus offer in the follow-up. Thank you so much for being here, and bye, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Good night, Carla.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.